Is it right that a toddler should be suspended from nursery? Well, it depends what they've done, you might say. Well, what if they were suspended from nursery because they were being transphobic? Now, you might wonder, how can a toddler be transphobic? I've wondered this myself when I was reading this article here in the Telegraph, because this seems to be a common phrase lately, but this is probably the most ridiculous story I've seen for a long time. And that seems to be a popular phrase recently, because there's a lot of stories that I think are the most ridiculous story that I've heard in a long time. But if you want some brutally honest opinions about these things and how the law might apply in the most bizarre scenario like this, please do subscribe to the channel. About half of you don't. I'd be really grateful if you did. And I've got a lot of special announcements coming up very soon with memberships to this channel and things that I'm going to offer and all that sort of stuff. So do check out all the buttons below. I'd be really grateful you supporting me here. And I will be spending yet more time pumping content into YouTube for you to enjoy and hopefully to help you. So please do subscribe. So where do we even start with this? A toddler kicked out of nursery for being transphobic. A child was suspended from a state school. Now, bearing in mind, the minimum age mandatory education is 5. This child apparently was 3 or 4, so not even of mandatory schooling age, but suspended from state school for abuse against sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, this is not to condone abuse in any form, of course, because particularly with sexual orientation, these sort of things, obviously the school has to step in and stop that from happening. But gender identity, I can only imagine, because there's no real detail. I'll look at the article in just a second and I'll link it below, but I can only imagine that the detail here is a boy was saying that they were a girl or vice versa, and the toddler in question didn't accept it, and therefore that was not accepting their gender identity, and perhaps they were saying unkind things. Now, again, I'm not condoning unkind things. They should not be said. The school should step in and do something about that. But how does a child of 3 or 4 years old get suspended for being transphobic? Let's have a look at the article, because there's a couple of concerning things out of our education secretary as well, which I'll come back to in a minute. And in fact, somebody reported me to my regulator for a comment about myself in a similar vein. More about that a little bit later in the video. Please do stick around for that. More about that in a minute. So according to data from the Department for Education, this child in question, aged 3 or 4, was suspended from a state school in 2022 to 2023 academic year for abuse against sexual orientation and gender identity. The school and further details were not disclosed. So I can only imagine what was said. And so those two being linked, let's put it bluntly, I can only imagine that the child didn't accept the gender and therefore made a comment that it was something to do with sexual orientation or whatever, which frankly, for toddlers, they probably don't understand anyway. It's probably learned behavior from somewhere else, which shouldn't be condoned, and the school was right to stamp it out. But to suspend the child, it just seems a little bit strange to me. Statistics show that 94 pupils at state primary schools were suspended or permanently excluded for transphobia and homophobia in 2022 to 2023. These included 10 pupils from year 1 and 3 from year 2. What concerns me is the comment by Bridget Phillipson, I presume in response to all of this, as quoted here. The DfE spokesperson said, all pupils and staff should feel safe and protected at the school and should never face violence or abuse. Fair enough. But goes on, the Education Secretary has been clear that she expects school leaders to enforce good behaviour and we're committed to a comprehensive programme of behaviour support for schools. But nothing at all to do with clarifying the point here as to whether or not a child that doesn't accept, I think the real key point is here, if a child does not accept what another child says is their gender identity, are they to be excluded just for not accepting their identity? This is the lacuna, the gap in information, in guidance, and really in the understanding as to how people are supposed to deal with this, because the big question mark is this. Did this just relate to a child that refused to accept that a boy was a girl or vice versa? That's the big question mark, because that is precisely the question that is raised in so many different places, in the NHS, in companies, in gyms. Do you not accept someone else's gender as they see it, as they say that it is? Because if you recall, the mandatory guidance for NHS Scotland says that everybody should accept what somebody else says that they are. And so if a Steve then says he is now a she called Tracy, and everybody else should accept that, and you don't accept that, is that then abuse just because you don't accept that? Or if you make a comment that you don't agree with that, does that become abuse? We really need to be clear about where this line is drawn. Because as I mentioned, I had a complaint made against me for a comment that I made about me, about myself on X, or Twitter as people still refer to it as, and I was reported to my regulator for that. It was dismissed, but I was reported nonetheless. And so regardless, that in itself feels like a form of abuse, because people making complaints about me in a professional context because I made a comment about me. More about that in a minute. You won't believe it. Don't go away. Stepping aside for a bit of trivia and something that will help you with a huge dose of irony, I'll explain that in a minute. A lot of people have asked me why and how I blur out images on websites that I show you when many other YouTube creators don't do that. Well, the simple reason is copyright, and that comes with a few quirks, so allow me to explain. So if I take the Express by way of example, forgive me Express, but you're the first one I thought of, maybe that's a good thing for them. So if you take this as an example, you'll see there's one image I've already blurred out here using a tool built into, an extension for Chrome. That's a Getty Images image, and the reason I've blurred it out is because if I were running an article like the Express here and use their license accreditation, etc. for the image, that's fine because it's purely editorial. As soon as I put that into a video and it's monetized on YouTube, then obviously that then crosses the territory potentially to be commercial, and they don't allow it. So they could very easily raise a copyright complaint and tag my video. So with the others here, I'm perfectly fine because they're adverts, and I'm sure they'll be happy that the adverts are being shown for free. For example, Tesco at the top there, they are adverts. And so I use a tool to blur those out. So that's how and why. So how does this help you, and why am I talking to you about this? Well, aside from needing to remove some of those images, you can also see just how cluttered this article is here. If we look at the bit that we can actually read, we've got the headline here, we've got the subheadline here, and then we've got the author information, and that's it. You can't see any of the article on this page apart from that. You have to scroll down, and then you start to get some of the article. But even then, you've only got that much of the article, and the rest is still adverts. So cue, ironically, an advert, which is NordVPN, because if you use NordVPN, it will get rid of all these adverts. Many of you don't know this, but you can see this. This is my NordVPN box here. You can see it's not connected there. If I now click Quick Connect, it will automatically connect me to the closest server, which is in the UK. Now I'm connected. Now I move that aside. And if I now refresh that page there, you'll see just how much cleaner it is without all of those adverts. Of course, I've still blurred that Getty Images in the middle because it's a Getty image. Now, you can see now that all those adverts have disappeared, it's a lot cleaner and easier to read, apart from one or two of the adverts that still remain, but that is a fantastic feature of NordVPN that many people don't realize. But what is a VPN in the first place? A VPN is a virtual private network. So think of your computer connecting to your Wi-Fi and your internet service provider. You get an IP address from them, and all of your internet traffic goes through that IP address. It's just like a house address, but for your computer. And your internet service provider can see all of the information and all the websites and everything that you visit, everything you download. They can monitor everything you do. But when you connect to NordVPN, it is a virtual network. It goes through one of their IP addresses. Then all of your traffic is anonymized and all of your traffic is encrypted. So going through a VPN protects your privacy online. And not only that, it will flag up any malicious websites, malicious downloads, and protect you and your machine from accessing dangerous websites, dangerous files, and prevent them before they cause damage to your system. It's available for all your devices, your laptops, your tablets, your phones, and out and about, particularly coffee shops where you might be connecting to unsafe networks. For example, if you're abroad and you want to access your banking app without all of the problems of the bank thinking you're somewhere else, you can go through the VPN, change your location to the UK, and that should absolutely be fine. And as they're a partner to my channel, if you use my link nordvpn.com/BBB, because that's the nickname you gave me, you get 4 months extra free on top of any deal that they're offering, on top of your 30-day money-back guarantee if you change your mind. But once you see it in action and the security it provides, it'll be peace of mind and you won't change your mind. So don't forget the link nordvpn.com/BBB, and that will get you 4 months extra free off that plan. If you're not signed up, I strongly recommend that you do that now. And thanks to Nord for sponsoring this video. So back to the complaint about me. Now I'm going to share a bit of this with you in the spirit of full transparency, so you can see what kind of complaint that people make against professionals such as me just for making a comment about me. And this was not even about anybody else. This was about me. Here it is. So this is my regulator writing back to an anonymous reporter that said, the anonymous reporter reported that on the 15th of February, Mr. Shansmith posted on X, which you believe is hate speech. So they reported this as hate speech, which is not. But if you remember my discussion on non-crime hate incidents, if people report this to the police, are they then going to record that as a hate incident? Because they shouldn't, because that would be a breach of certain human rights, which could very well give rise to a claim against the police if they did that. But I've discussed that in other videos. So this was in response to someone else's tweet, and this was my tweet in response. They said, the tweet reads, total garbage. I'm not cisgender or non-trans. You see, I was responding to another post that said that people that identify with the same sex that they're born with are either cis or cisgendered or non-trans, and that's what they should be referred to as. I don't accept that. Fundamentally, philosophically, I don't accept that. I'm just a man, is the way that I see this. And so, again, I do not intend this video to upset anybody. This is my view, my belief. You are entitled to your belief. If yours differs from mine, that's perfectly fine. We can have different views, and you can still watch and enjoy my channel. And I mean no offense. But the point of this video is this. If we stamp out free speech and people's right to say what they fundamentally and philosophically believe about themselves, we have a problem. My tweet goes on. I said, I'm a normal man. It's that simple. Because it is that simple. That's my view. My view is it's simple. I am just a man. Now, this was not even about anybody else's identity or anything else. This was about me. How people refer to me. I want people to refer to me as a man and my wife as a woman. I am a man and she's a woman. We are man and woman. And so I tweeted that it's that simple. The regulator responded and said, I looked carefully at everything you sent the BSB with your report in order to assess whether there's been a potential breach of any of the provisions of the BSB handbook. I reached the conclusion that there has not been a potential breach, which means the BSB cannot investigate the concerns you've raised. It may help, they go on, which is why I share this here in full transparency in the hope that it helps somebody. It may help, they say, if we explain that the law recognises hate speech if the person has demonstrated hostility based on race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, or transgender identity, or been motivated by hostility based on those things. Now, that would be pure speech in and of itself, without really any opinion, without expressing a view on a given set of facts or circumstances or a philosophical belief or anything else, just pure hate speech. For example, if somebody said everybody should hate, insert a protected characteristic here, then that might become hate speech because there's nothing of real substance to it. However, even then, it still has to be considered in light of the freedom of expression. They go on. Upon reviewing the tweet in question, it is my assessment that Mr. Shansmith is expressing his personal opinion regarding his identity, which he is entitled to express. Therefore, this tweet does not have the potential to breach the BSB handbook, nor does it deviate from the BSB social media guidance. I have also taken into account Mr. Shansmith's right under Article 10, the right to the freedom of expression. Therefore, I've concluded that no breach has occurred and the tweet does not constitute hate speech. Accordingly, we cannot consider the matter any further. And so it would have to be something really serious to amount to hate speech. It would have to be pure, unfiltered hate with no debate, no argument, no opinion, no comment on a particular set of facts or circumstances. even if it was offensive, even if people didn't like it, those sort of things are still within the realm of free speech. Now, I am obviously not encouraging that people abuse each other and are nasty to each other, but when you express a view, you are entitled to express that in strong terms, even in the sense that it might cause offence. You'll recall the police had to apologise once when they put up a billboard that said, being offensive is an offence. Which of course it's not. Being offensive is not an offence. I'm not a fan of people being offensive towards each other, but where do you draw the line? This is the problem. Because something that I say you may not find offensive, but somebody else might find offensive. And if they find it offensive and report it because they personally found it offensive, that's when we enter the territory of these police non-crime hate incident reports. It's not a crime because it doesn't cross any legal threshold. It certainly doesn't cross a criminal threshold, but if someone perceives it to be something that causes them offence or alarm or distress or whatever, but not to the criminal standard, they just don't like it, and they report it to the police. Do the police then report it and record it as a non-crime hate incident? This is the problem that I have with the erosion of free speech, and is encapsulated so unfortunately perfectly in this headline here, with a toddler being kicked out of nursery for being transphobic. Now, I don't know, full caveat, full disclosure, I don't know the full circumstances because they're not reported for obvious reasons. It might turn out that this was an absolutely horrid child bullying somebody else, and it was absolutely perfectly valid for the school to kick this toddler out. So let's say, for example, I'm a martial arts instructor. I teach actually currently for someone else's school. I used to run my own school. Now, if I had a child that was being abusive to another child, regardless of freedom of speech, regardless of these sort of things, I would take them aside and I would prevent them from doing that. So there is a line here that it would be permitted to discipline and remove said child from the area to prevent the abuse. But it depends what they call abuse, because if a certain person just did not accept the identity, the gender identity of another person, that becomes a problem with freedom of speech. And so even an organization such as a school could be liable for the curtailment of that right to the freedom of expression. As in the case, because I'm not making this up, as in the case of the University of Sussex being fined £585,000 for free speech and governance breaches. They said that the documents failed to uphold freedom of speech and academic freedom, among other things. So this is where it leads to. On the one hand, you've got a toddler being kicked out. Who knows what they actually said? But this leads right up to university being fined more than £500,000, essentially on the same topic of breach of free speech. So it depends what happened there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As I said, the caveat is this might be perfectly valid. The school might have a perfectly good reason to have excluded that child. The child may have been vulgar and abusive and it was right that they were removed. But it depends. And we don't know and we won't know because only the people involved will know the truth of that. And I suspect they won't want to make those details public any more than they already have. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and approach these things with an open mind, because that's what free speech is. It's the discussion and the exchange of ideas freely, without the fear, or it should be without the fear, of prosecution and persecution, reports and disciplinary action and all that sort of stuff. So let me know what you think. But on another note, very quickly, I'll link this below so you can go read it yourself. A great story covered by Magistrate's blog about an auditor. Those are the guys that go around with cameras and, in my view, aim to antagonize people so that they get a response and a reaction that they can film and then put it on YouTube, etc. One of them has now had to pay £32,000 costs because he tried to sue for false imprisonment and failed. In the long story short, he was filming on private property, filming vehicles at a police station, which on anyone's argument, he shouldn't be doing that. Now, out in public, I make these free speech arguments. I'm the advocate. I will fight for and I will give the arguments against. So I've made these arguments for in previous videos where you are free to go and film what you wish within reason. When it becomes private, that makes it a lot more difficult. And so the judge, Her Honor Beach, said that the behavior outside the police station was utterly unacceptable, and in that her view was designed to provoke the sergeant, and noted that the use of force was necessary and reasonable. And thus this order has now been ordered to pay around £32,000 in costs. So I've said it before, you can go out and film what you wish within reason, and if you cross a line, you might be held liable for that, because as is freedom, you are free to do anything, but you're not free from the consequences. So there are certain consequences in certain situations. So I'll link that below. Go and have a read. Very interesting story for those that have a particular interest in auditing and that sort of thing. There are consequences. So I hope you found that interesting. Please remember to like the video. That really does sort of push my videos out to a wider audience. Please do subscribe. Check out the memberships below. Lots more to come on memberships. And as always, thank you for watching.